Hello and welcome to the fifth webinar for those who've been invited to submit final applications to CLEAR's Digitizing Hidden Collections, Amplifying Unheard Voices program this year. I'm Louisa Quasigra, Managing Director at CLEAR, and today's session will focus on staffing and budget.
Before we get started with introductions to the platform and our presenter for today's webinar, we want to launch a quick poll to gauge how you're feeling about today's topics. Here we go. People are still filling it out. I'll give it a couple more seconds for those just coming. All right, we'll end the poll here. Now, here's some notes about using Zoom during this session. A live transcript is being generated if you'd like to utilize it. To turn on this feature, click the CC Live Transcript button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Attendees will be muted throughout the presentation. However, you're welcome to use chat for general introductions and conversation. If a chat box isn't already displaying on your Zoom screen, you can hover your mouse toward the bottom of the screen and open it manually. In order to send a message to everyone, remember to change the default from all panelists and hosts to everyone. We ask that you use the separate Q&A box to ask questions. This can be opened the same way as the chat box. Because we have limited time together, please feel free to follow along with questions as they come in and upvote them to let us know that it would be helpful to you to have them answered live. We will do our best to answer all of the questions live, but we will also share responses to all questions alongside the recording. This session is being recorded. The slides, Q&A, recording, and transcript will be made available on the Apply for an Award page of our website in the next 2 weeks.
Before we move into our program content, we'd like to center today's conversation by acknowledging that as residents of the U.S., we are speaking to you from unceded land of many Indigenous peoples. We recognize a longstanding history that has brought us to reside on this land, and we seek to have greater understanding of our place within that colonial history. We denounce any acts of terrorism, colonialism, and environmental disregard, both past and present. In particular, we would like to respectfully acknowledge and recognize the original and current caretakers of the land, water, and air where we live, all Indigenous peoples and all their ancestors and descendants. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on their homelands and ask you to join me in acknowledging all Indigenous communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. May this acknowledgement and our ongoing work demonstrate CLEAR's commitment to beginning the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. If you haven't done so already, we'd love for you to introduce yourself in the chat and share a land acknowledgement for the area where you live, if you'd like. During today's session, our co-hosts will dig into staffing and budget. We've allotted 90 minutes total for today, and we'll pause around 2:35 p.m. Eastern for a quick break during their content. We're hoping for an engaging time of conversation around staffing considerations and training needs, offering a compelling case for need in a budget narrative, and using a budget narrative to build and justify budget detail. The plan is to reserve about 25 minutes for Q&A near the end of this session. Both the session co-hosts and CLEAR staff will be available to answer questions at that time. So while you may pose questions throughout using the Q&A box, keep in mind that we might not get to every question as it's asked. Staff will be keeping track and will circle back to any unanswered questions during the dedicated Q&A.
In today's session, you'll learn more about the skills and strategies you need to complete the following application tasks. The project details capacity task, which includes the resumes and/or job descriptions uploads, In the project details, need for support task, which includes the subcontracts, budget detail, and budget narrative uploads. Now we're glad to turn things over to our co-hosts, Dr. M. Stephanie Chancy and Tanía Ríos Marrero from the Digital Library of the Caribbean, where Stephanie is the Director of Operations and Tanía is the Project Coordinator for the Digital Library of the Caribbean. We'll take just a moment to let Stephanie and Tanía share their slides and get oriented.
Okay, good afternoon. First, I just want to say thanks to all of you for being here and congratulations for your work on these grant applications. I'm sure it's not easy and that it takes much patience and determination, so congratulations for getting this far in the process. That alone speaks volumes to your commitment to the important work of digitizing hidden collections. So thank you. And thanks so much to the folks at Clear for inviting Stephanie and I. I hope that the ideas and thoughts I have to share in this first portion of the presentation will be useful to you as you think about and refine your applications. I want to start by sharing a little bit of background on me, so you know where I'm coming from and have a sense for the experiences that I'm pulling from. So again, my name is Tanía. I am a librarian and an archivist living and working in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I work as project coordinator for the Digital Library of the Caribbean, or DLOC for short. Quick intro to DLOC. DLOC is a cooperative digital library that preserves and provides open access to resources about and from the Caribbean. DLOC uses a post-custodial approach to archives and consists of over 90 partners that share materials from their collections and that share governance over the organization. We're currently in the middle of a grant-funded project ourselves. It's called the Revitalizing DLOC Initiative. There are several programmatic areas to our project, and one of these is supporting the ethical reuse of DLOC collections in teaching and research. So in my role, I manage a program that supports open educational resource development for Caribbean studies. So from that grant, we've developed an OER program that is now in its second year. And prior to my role in DLOC, I've worked as a digital archivist for cultural heritage materials here in Puerto Rico and on a range of digital collections and digital humanities projects over the last several years. I've also worked in other grant-funded initiatives, and in the not so distant past, I worked as a community organizer at the Free Library of Philadelphia, and that role involved building community engagement frameworks for a big grant project called the 21st Century Library Initiative. So I'm passionate about community-centered work in and through libraries. And I speak with you all today, not from the perspective of a reviewer or admin, but as a worker in grant-funded projects. And with my organizing background, I've always been interested in thinking about what groups need to work effectively together toward shared goals. And I think that's relevant to the capacity, staffing and capacity component of your applications, which is the section I'll be thinking and talking about with you today. Okay. So the capacity component. So my feeling is that this part is as much about thinking through and articulating the strengths of your team and organizations as it is also about identifying opportunities to build new and even better ways of working together and working with collections. It's super positive to use these types of strength based approaches to project planning, starting from that place of positive recognition, naming our collective points of pride and identity creates a strong foundation from which to build. There's also an exciting opportunity here to think carefully with your team about potential gaps in capacity, thinking through critically and creatively about areas for growth, and using the grant application to dream with your team members, to ask yourselves, what are we currently doing really well? What do we need support with? What are our ideal working conditions? What resources do we need to not only meet the material deliverables of the project, but to thrive as people doing this work? There's opportunity in these projects to create new and better conditions for meaningful work to occur, work that creates new collections as well as new relationships, connections, and communities. So to explore this part of the application a bit further, I want to talk about the power and potential of community asset mapping. Asset mapping is a collaborative, often facilitated process by which a group can identify and discover their strengths, and at the same time share stories and connect with each other. Maybe you've heard this term before, maybe not. It's typically known as an approach to community development, but asset-based approaches are transferable to project planning of all sorts. I won't go too deep in the weeds of how to go about asset mapping, but know that there are a large range of exercises you could try out with your team. I do want to touch on the larger concepts because I think that this is a useful model to reference for this part of your application, primarily because one outcome of asset mapping exercises is documentation, right? So documentation of a community or an organization's existing resources and strengths. And that would be useful, right? But even more significant than the resulting documentation, I would argue, is the process behind creating this documentation, the process of groups collaboratively and collectively identifying and in many cases discovering their strengths. I really like to advocate for the use of thoughtfully facilitated group asset mapping sessions as part of project planning of any sort. And there's lots of wonderful free resources and facilitation guides for this type of activity online. But again, main concepts. So what are assets? Assets really boil down to those aspects of people and organizations that are valuable, things that bring value to a project. And assets shouldn't be viewed in a strictly formal sense, right? Assets can be wide-ranging and more qualitative than quantitative. So here on this slide, I share just a few sample asset types. There are personal assets, so this might include an individual's subject matter knowledge or technical expertise, as well as personal background and lived experience. For example, maybe you or a person on your team brings a type of local or place-based knowledge to a digital collections project. Maybe that knowledge informs a multilingual metadata aspect to your project. Maybe it informs a reparative description aspect to your project. Passions, dreams, and aspirations of individuals are also valuable and noteworthy. Whether or not you very extensively document these in your grant applications, I think that these are things to learn and know about your project team. These are the things that catalyze and drive teams forward, right? They are the things that keep projects together when organizations inevitably undergo change. In community organizing, we talk about self-interest. a lot. We talk about the importance of learning what compels individuals to engage and stay engaged. And this totally applies here, right? We should learn what compels people to engage in the work of building digital collections and note that. Having folks talk about their passions and dreams and learning about the passions and dreams of each other through a group asset mapping exercise can be a really powerful way to bring a team together around shared values. And then once you know also about the passions and aspirations of individuals on your team, then you can really implement mentorship and systems for personal and professional development into your project. Making plans to leverage the project as a space for capacity building of individuals. All super important. I'll talk a little bit more about mentorship and capacity building in a moment, but I just really wanted to call out and highlight this point that the aspirations of individuals are important aspects of your projects, and I think worthy of identification in project planning. So aside from those personal assets, there are social and organizational assets. So thinking through relationships, networks, connections, both between individuals and groups, and both formal and informal, I think, are valuable. And you'd be surprised how many relationships that you, perhaps as the person preparing the grant application, may not be fully aware of without an asset mapping exercise that involves your whole team. In any case, getting a full picture of your relationships at this stage is super important. And I love that CLEAR places such large emphasis on this, on the relationships. I love that the relationships are held in such high esteem, because it's really from and through relationships that this work happens at all. This work of storytelling, of documentation, of preservation, and not just any stories, right? Stories that have historically and persistently and systematically been marginalized or censored or subject to erasure. The work of recovery and care and stewardship of those stories, that's all deeply relational work, just innately. So relationships are how we do this work, and they're also why we do this work. So quick visualization here that just simply shows that we are ecosystemic. I didn't make this chart. I pulled it from an institute that does lots of asset mapping and organizational development consulting. But I like this visualization because it situates us individuals in relationship to other entities. And again, thinking through making use of asset mapping as a model, as a framework for documenting strengths. We could take time to map strengths in all of these micro and macro realms. And it may sound simple enough, but working through a collaborative and participatory process to do this with your team at this early stage can be revelatory and potentially transformative for all involved. I have facilitated asset mapping sessions with groups of all sizes and at all stages of a given project, and I have been so inspired to witness the ways that people frequently undermine their own skills and strengths or else not fully recognize them. And it's through intentional group work that we uncover and value those strengths, both in ourselves and in our group mates. In these types of exercises, people are constantly learning new things about their group mates, things they didn't know previously, things they never thought to ask. It's truly a method for deep listening and learning about ourselves and each other. And learning also not only about existing resources within our projects, but also potential resources. Circling back to this question of how are we using the grant opportunity to grow and create new and better conditions for our work. And on that note, I'm going to pivot now to sharing some resources that I think are helpful and also vital to thinking through staffing and by extension, working conditions. So the CLEAR application asks you to upload CVs for the PIs or key project staff or job descriptions if the positions will be filled at a later date. And in the bulleted instructions in this section, CLEAR says that job descriptions should be equitable and acknowledge the precarity of contingent labor. There are really good resources on this topic. For example, the Collective Responsibility Labor Advocacy Toolkit, a super important suite of resources. I'm not sure if everybody is aware, here on this call is aware of these tools. Maybe it's been mentioned before, but these are a must read. The toolkit consists of a white paper that addresses in detail the specific problems of precarity that grant-funded positions can create and reproduce. It discusses the problems and consequences of term positions that are part-time, underclassified, or without benefits, and how these positions can negatively impact the lives and careers of workers, particularly workers from minoritized communities. And it talks about how these working conditions can be not only harmful to workers in some cases, but also detrimental to the projects as well. Poor working conditions can lead to retention issues. Staff can turn over quickly if projects are inappropriately scoped, or if positions are poorly designed or not well supported. So this paper develops a framework for actionable guidelines on improved grant labor practices. It's a really wonderful resource. And I think it is worthwhile to spend some time during this session looking carefully at some of the guidelines created by the Digital Library Federation Labor Working Group, as well as the project criteria available in the Collective Equity Handbook. Both of these are resources inside of the larger toolkit, and they're both truly awesome resources. And what they're doing is essentially breaking down the building blocks and essential elements of equitable grant-funded positions. For instance, they talk about the importance of prioritizing full-time positions with benefits over the creation of multiple part-time positions. They prompt us to ask, are the position's benefits and classification equitable within the institution and sector? Benefits, as we know, could include healthcare, sick leave and vacation time, retirement, but also workload distribution that accommodates contribution to research and service. Relocation expenses, if you're asking folks to relocate for the project. Also remote work is a potential benefit. This one, remote work, is a big one. Consider whether or not you actually need everyone on the team to physically relocate to the place where your institution is located if you are hiring for the project. Not everyone can afford to relocate, even with some relocation benefits, especially for term positions. Yeah, I would just kind of like to uplift that a lot of digital collections work, not all, certainly not all, but a lot can be done successfully remotely. For example, I am working right now for DLOC 100% remotely from Puerto Rico. And I don't think that remote work is a super common benefit for a lot of grant-funded library workers in general yet. But The PIs who created my position description designed this benefit into the project that I'm currently working in. They pushed for this benefit. And it's allowed for me to stay near my family and community in Puerto Rico instead of having to relocate to Gainesville at the University of Florida for the short period of the grant term. And so I think that there's a lot to be said for remote work in digital libraries and digital collections work in general. Again, of course, doesn't apply to all of the work that needs to be done for digital collections development, but some of it. And it's worth considering. The toolkit resources also prompt us to ask about equitable salaries. It asks us, are the proposed salaries equitable with the cost of living for the geographic region, the work being done, and the credentials required? They provide some tools that can help with assessing this, including the MIT Living Wage Calculator and United for Alice. I think, providing folks with a living wage to do this work, and really thinking critically about wages and how we're paying and supporting the labor that goes behind this work is really important. Keeping in mind too how labor is currently divided in your institution. I pretty recently, I once learned of a difficult, contentious case of grant-funded workers doing a special digitization and digital collections a project in a state archive with much higher pay than the state archives workers. And that created a difficult dynamic in the institution. So that's something to keep in mind too. But in general, using the grant application to advocate for livable wages. We really need baseline livable wages in this profession. And we should be raising and informing new standards around livable wages at every turn, using every opportunity we can. The toolkit resources also prompt us to ask if the salary, if salaries are appropriate for the proposed scope of work. I think just in general, ensuring that the proposed scope of work is actually feasible for a temporary grant-funded position. I was part of a project once that really struggled to scope realistic project goals. And so upheld unreasonable expectations over the workers. The scope of work they had also didn't estimate or allow for personal time or sick time. It's like they kind of overlooked that part. So it's like when a project staffer inevitably got sick, then suddenly there was this feeling like we were all behind on grant deliverables, and there was always this sense of urgency and anxiety in the project. And that was due to poor project planning and position design too. So scope of work should allow for the necessary and expected slowdowns and changes that will happen to people and to organizations and groups. Another influencing factor into scope of work are digitization goals, right? Like making sure that the scope of work upholds realistic digitization goals that account for people's needs. Digital Library Federation and CLEAR together have a really good scoping tool for this thing exactly. It's called the Digitization Cost Calculator. And it makes cost and time estimates. And that might be useful to you as well as you think about scope of work and position descriptions. And the last thing I want to briefly note, and we could talk about any number of these elements at length. And again, the resources are so extensive and detailed and good. But the toolkit resources really emphasize the importance, the indispensable importance of providing institutional support for worker growth. So this looks like professional development funding through training and travel support and in the personnel budgeting. Supporting the workers' participation in professional activities like research, service, publication, and presentations at conferences and so forth. Providing structured mentorship, acknowledging the workers' ability and agency to steer project goals. Grant workers should have opportunities to develop new skills, build their capacity, develop their professional portfolios, and not solely perform tasks as the toolkit describes. So these resources provide way more detail and a long list of ways to provide this type of infrastructural support to workers. Just to provide another personal example, when I first started with DLOC, I had experience with project management and digital scholarship, but I did not have experience with open educational resources and library publishing, and that was a big part of my new role. And so I was encouraged and financially supported to enroll in a certificate program. It was a 10-week certificate program through the Open Education Network that would prepare me for managing an OER program. And so through that, I gained access to learning modules and instructors and a community of peers to discuss my work with. And that was hugely beneficial to both me professionally. It builds my portfolio and my CV and my experience and helps me perform my role. And it also benefits the deliverables and outcomes of the grant project, right? And that's the thing. Ultimately, this person-centered approach to project design that the collective equity and DLF working group authors advocate for, this approach benefits the workers and the deliverables and outcomes of projects. Everybody and everything benefits. And at the same time, when we implement and put these values into practice, we shift culture in the profession. And frankly, radical culture shifts within LIS are super important and necessary. And we think, when we think critically and creatively about our staffing models, when we pair that with participatory, strength-based approaches to project planning, we create space and possibility for meaningful work with special collections to happen into the future. So thanks. We're going to take a break, a 5-minute break. I'll hand it over to Clear staff, and then we're going to, Stephanie's going to talk about budgets right after that.
Hi, I will see you back at 2:38. Thank you. 2:30.
In 4 years, people, and I left myself muted. Good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Chancy, and as a very quick reminder, I am the Caribbean Partnerships Librarian and Director of DLOC Operations here at the University of Florida. My role today is to talk to you about budgets and your grant application. I do think it's a little bit funny that I'm talking to you about the numbers, since I always say that God or the higher power knew what they were doing when they made me a historian and not an accountant. I do want to echo Tanía and say congratulations. You've made it to this full application round. You have your narrative, and if you're anything like me, you've put off what you consider the quote unquote hard part until last, the budget. Now you may see this as procrastination, but more accurately, it is productive procrastination, since you are probably doing other necessary things for your final application. Let me give you a little boost. Waiting until you are almost done with all the other sections of your application before you dig into the budget is actually a wise course of action. Today, I'd like to share some tips to help you as you work on your budget. Full disclosure, you're also probably going to get some stories along with those suggestions. Now, one of the things that I tend to do when I'm undertaking something that's not fully in my comfort zone is I like to go back to basics to make sure that I understand what is being asked of me. And when I say basics, I really mean basic. So our very first basic is to define budget. What is a budget? It is an approximation of expenses that will be incurred during a set period, as in this case, for a specific project. When applicable, the budget also includes expected revenue or income. To put it even more simply, your budget is a written plan of how you will spend your money. Now, we all have budgets for our households, for vacations that we're planning, for major purchases that we need to undertake. A grant budget is not that much different than our personal budgets. Well, it's different in one big way. It probably has a few extra zeros. So when should you start thinking about your project budget? Cost considerations should be part of your grant application process from the beginning. You may not get to the concrete figures until you are some ways along in the process, but thinking about what things cost, how much staffing you need, and what that will cost, and any equipment you might need to buy should be in your mind as you lay out your objectives, goals, and outcomes. After all, your budget is your grant narrative in numbers. Basically, what the budget does is it outlines the money that you are going to need to carry out your proposed project. Thus, you need to have a firm grasp and understanding of your project narrative, your project goals, your objectives, and your outcomes. Now, you know it's an official presentation by me. Michelangelo Buonarroti has managed to make it in. You need to also be well-versed in the necessary steps that you need to take to achieve your goals and your objectives. That's why it's a good idea to tackle your budget last. Your budget lays out what each step of your proposal will cost. And this is in terms of staff salaries, fringe benefits, equipment, possible external consultants and contractors, travel and training. Your goal with the budget is to convey and this is true with other sections of your application as well, you are trying to convey that you have a realistic understanding of how much it is going to cost to see your project successfully through to completion. Okay, so where do you get these numbers? Your budget comes from the activities that you're proposing to carry out for your project. These numbers need to be realistic estimates that reflect what you will actually require to implement and carry out the project. It needs to be comprehensive and detailed. This is how you show the funder and the panel of reviewers that you understand and can justify why you are asking for a certain amount of money. It's important that your numbers be specific and reflect real costs per item or per hour. It may make your budget look really nice, and even if you round everything up by $100 or $1,000. But the reviewers who are looking at your application, they are people just like you. They are working on programs and projects just like yours. So what's going to happen? They're going to see these inflated numbers and they're going to go, they're going to start questioning them. Giving the precise and accurate numbers shows reviewers and funders that you've done your research and that you've thought deeply and realistically about the project for which you are seeking funding. Now, I did prepare for this session, and in my preparation, I looked at 2 books on writing grant proposals. And there are a million of those types of books out there. The first was Deborah Ward's Writing Grant Proposals That Win, and Ellen Karsh and Arlen Sue Fox's The Only Grant Writing Book You'll Ever Need. Karsh and Fox indicate that as you work on your budget, you need to ask yourself 2 key questions. Is the amount of money that I'm asking for sufficient to achieve the goals and objectives that I've set out? To determine this, go back to why am I doing this? Go back to your objectives. You also need to ask yourself, is the amount reasonable? Is it outlandish, or is it in between? Are you asking for too much or not enough? What you are aiming for, what I'll call the Goldilocks of asks. You don't want it to be too high. You don't want it to be too low. You want it to be just right. To get those accurate numbers, you need to go back and forth with your narrative, your goals, and your objectives. Every line item in your budget needs to be reflected in the proposal narrative. So it might help if you put the narrative page numbers that correspond with the budget line items. Make sure the budget line items and their matching objectives make sense. I know what you're thinking. That's all well and good to say that, but how do I do that? Base yourself on your experience in your profession, in your community, and in your what you do. If you have something in your budget that you're not familiar with, talk with colleagues, ask people. Now, my colleague Tanía did talk about staffing, and this likely is going to be the most expensive item in your budget. And as we prepared for this presentation, I remembered something that happened when I was working at the Digital Library of the Caribbean as a graduate student. One of our affiliates was invited to apply for funds for a digital project in Haiti. And she came to us for advice on purchasing equipment. But as we were talking to her, the then executive director looked at her budget and he says, wait a minute, you are way underestimating how much time it's going to take to do this digitization project. Based on his experience, when calculating a workday in Haiti, you needed to account for the minimum 1-hour coffee snack break in the morning, an extended lunch, and typically that the workday ends at 4, not 5. Getting that insight from someone who had worked in Haiti impacted the way the budget was written and how the timeline was estimated. Similarly, if you are hiring consultants or contractors, talk to them. Get their rate per hour, get their rate per day or per job. You'll also want to get prices for equipment from a reputable vendor. Ask people. They're usually pretty happy to give you the name of a favorite vendor so that they can get the business. And that's also a way to find out who you should stay away from. You don't want to over budget expenses, but you also don't want to put yourself in a bind by under budgeting. And I think that this is probably the most important piece of advice that I'll share with you today. Be informed about the real costs of things. Whatever you do, don't guess and don't rely on memory. Now, I'm supposed to talk to you about the budget narrative, but we can't really discuss that unless we talk about the line item budget first. Most funders, CLEAR included, give you detailed instructions about each section of their application, and they have a whole section on the budget. Read that very carefully. Now, I know we are in the digital age and we're all trying to divest ourselves of paper, but I suggest strongly that you print out the application instructions. Set some time aside, read those instructions, and highlight what the funder is asking for. Budget guidelines for CLEAR hidden special collections state the following. The award can only be between $50,000 and $300,000. They'll tell you what costs they allow, what you can use their money for. Those are your line item budgets, and these include staff salaries. As Tanía indicated, budget for and pay a living equitable wage for your area and industry. Fringe or fringe benefits, though related to salaries, it's typically a separate line item. In the US, that might include health insurance, retirement benefits, Medicare, Social Security, unemployment insurance. All of these constitute a percentage of the annual salary. Now, some institutions like the University of Florida, where Tanía and I are, they have a set formula for fringe that is automatically calculated. Other allowable costs include staff training and consultant fees. There are some allowable costs that have restrictions. CLEAR allows that you can have administrative support, and they also allow you to purchase equipment and supplies. But for both of those, the maximum allocation is $10,000. So you can certainly enter an amount less than $10,000, but you can't go over that amount in your budget. Travel and conference fees are also allowable, but the travel needs to be necessary to execute the project. The person has to be directly involved in the project. And if they're going to a conference, they have to present about the project and not just attend. You need to be aware of these as you do your line item budget. That needs to be detailed and specific, and this will help you create the budget narrative. The narrative explains each item. It explains how you arrived at the cost and how that cost relates to or helps you attain your stated goals. It's a supplement to the project narrative, and it gives you an opportunity to explain all your costs in detail. At the end of the day, it's the story of your project in numbers. Explain how each expense connects to an objective. How will this money help you complete the activities and meet the objectives and reach the outcomes? How and why did you come up with the numbers for each line item? So in your budget narrative, you need to indicate, what are you paying for? How much are you paying per item? How much are you paying each person per day? Who are you paying? Now, you don't need to give people's names, but you definitely need to give position titles. How many hours per week is each person expected to devote to the grant? How many days or hours will a consultant be needed? How did you arrive at these dollar amounts? And if you are getting in-kind donations, include those in your line item budget as well as in your budget narrative. So if a hotel is giving you room nights for guest speakers, include that in the budget and give it a value. That will explain to the reviewer why you are asking, for example, for $60,000 instead of the $100,000 that may be required to successfully complete your project. The budget narrative is helpful as you make sure that all aspects, tasks, activities, and other necessities of your proposed project are covered. As Karsh and Fox say, your budget is showing that you can meet program needs in terms of staffing and other costs. And you're showing that each of the activities that you say you're going to carry out can be done properly with the amount of money that you're asking for in your budget. Now, I will admit that like Patrick Starr, I cannot math. Maybe you are like me and you cannot math either. Your budget is not really about math. It's about determining the right amount of money that you need to successfully see your project through to fruition. As to the math involved, that's why we have Excel. It does the long additions for us. And I think I'm just at time. Thank you very much for your time and your attention, and I look forward to getting your questions.
Okay, I think we're going to start with the question and answer period now, and we may have some already submitted. Let me get to the document. Here we go.
I see Annette Holierhoek. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. She asked if we are contributing in-kind staffing. Do we include this in the budget, but enter 00 in the budget and explain in the budget narrative what the true value is? Actually, you need probably, if you're having in-kind donations, what I have seen done in the past is there is a column for in-kind, and you give it a value. And then you can explain further in the budget narrative. Now, clear, y'all may do it differently, so please interject if I am giving incorrect information.
Yeah, you can address in-kind donation, in-kind budget lines in both the narrative and the budget detail if you like, but the budget detail is not necessarily required.
And it should be, if it is in your budget detail, it's not a part of your award total and it needs to be a separate line. I will pitch this next one. When adding time for research/professional development service, what is an acceptable amount of time? Could it be 10 hours per week, more or less? I think that's maybe a Tanía question.
Yeah, I mean, I took a look at my own position description to see what it said about that. It said 5% of my total duties are dedicated toward professional development as needed. I hope that's helpful.
So somebody was just asking me, how do you figure out if you have somebody who's dividing their time and they're supposed to give you 40% here and 60% here, how do you figure that out? And again, we're going to have to math. And I think that the way you would have to do that is figure out, if you work 40 hours a week, what is 5% of 40 hours?
Yeah.
And that's the amount of time that you allocate to research, professional development, and service.
Okay, the next question we have, thanks for this. I have more of a clear team question regarding allowable costs in regard to sharing the results of the project. In addition to our other sharing platforms, we will want to update our public-facing database. Is the purchase of new software that integrates with our CRM database allowed? You can always, email us directly to explain the exact software that you're going to use, but we do allow supplies and materials and dedicated software and hardware for the digitization and production of the metadata. There is a maximum, this will be under equipment, supplies and materials, so it would be $10,000. What you will want to reflect in your budget narrative possibly is that you will be able to afford the continuation of this software after the grant period. So make sure that you explain that clearly, and those are the things that we're looking for. Are you utilizing this software just for this particular project, but that you can keep the materials front-facing for the public afterwards and sustain it over time?
And it is limited that it must be a one-time cost.
Yes.
Annette has a question. She is located in Canada and health insurance, etc., is included in gross salary. Oh, it just moved. Do we still need to separately explain this under fringe expenses? I believe so. If it's coming out of grant dollars, because for us, we are fortunate here at the University of Florida that health insurance expenses is included as part of our benefits package. And that is figured into the fringe. So it may be called something different in Canada, but I believe if it's coming from grant dollars, if you're going to be paying that out of grant dollars, then it needs to be included on the budget.
That's correct.
Yeah, and I would say if it's a component of the salary, that is acceptable, but that could be explained in the narrative if you need to show why you don't have that line in your detail.
Yeah, separate from the fringe, just once again, justifying and making it as clear to reviewers as possible in your narrative. The less questions they have, the better, the better for your application.
The compensation from the the two co-PIs, they're trying to compensate the work they will be doing as project managers and contributing to digitization labor. However, when they are budgeting for that, it appears that their own compensation takes a huge chunk of the budget before any needed staff/student hires. Any advice for how to approach this issue?
Stephanie, do you have any advice for that?
I tell you, I just I came on board last year, and this year we had another departure. So that's another thing that you need to plan for is staff changes. And all of a sudden I found myself responsible for the budget. And one of the things that I noticed is the biggest part of the budget is staff expenses. If there's any way, maybe this is one of the areas where if your institution is amenable, you do part of your salary as an in-kind donation. So you're not taking grant dollars, but so you do it but you're explaining why you're not asking for as much in staff salaries, since you and your co-PI are giving your time as an in-kind, your institution is giving your time as an in-kind donation. That is the one way that I'm thinking that you might be able to address this.
Yeah, and unlike our recordings at risk that requires outsourcing the digitization of the materials, this one can be done in-house. So there is an expectancy that the salary costs may be a little higher than what we would normally see. I think that's great advice from Stephanie. And making sure that also when you justify your salaries on there, that the work that you're doing is as it just appears for this particular project and not necessarily the work you normally do in your job role at your organization. So making that distinction in your budget narrative is important also.
Yeah, and really really explaining what the work being done by the PIs is, because if it is digitization, I mean, that is the core of the grant and the grant's goals. If that is done via vendor or via in-house, it can look really different on that budget detail.
And the other thing that I would advise, since the digitization is being done in-house, that if you, when I first started to digitize, it always takes longer than you think it's going to take. So do keep that in mind. And it's not because your workday is truncated. It just, especially since you're digitizing for preservation, it takes a lot. I mean, I was scanning for Stephanie for years. And when I started working for DLOC, apparently Stephanie's standards are not the same as the preservation standards. So, it does take a lot longer than you anticipate. So this is one where I would suggest that maybe if you've not done something like that before, reach out to somebody who's done a project similar. Usually people are pretty amenable and open to talking to you and giving you advice.
Here's a follow-up on the asset mapping one I think we might have missed. Is this a process that you recommend including in the project activities? And or should this be done ahead of the grant proposal?
I think either or, one helpful aspect of asset mapping is that it produces documentation. Like an asset mapping exercise will produce documentation of existing strengths in the organization, and that's part of the capacity component of the application. So there could be some preliminary asset mapping that happens as part of the application. It's optional. I think it would be helpful to the application process, but it's also something that can happen after, and it can happen over the course of several weeks. It can happen in multiple sessions. Sessions can build off one another. They can really kind of be used as a way to bring everyone on the team into alignment with why they're there and what binds them to the project and how the project is strong, right? So yeah, asset mapping can happen before, during, after. It can happen like mid project too, if there's like a need for group work. Then it has like an interesting way of kind of gelling folks together. So I think that it's useful on different parts of a project.
We also have, what if our organization's salaries currently do not match those identified in the living wage calculator? Also, our organization does not provide benefits. Will this count against us?
That's, what do you all say, Clear? that one's a you.
Yeah. In terms of salaries that don't match the living wage calculator, I will say if you have salaries in the detail that the panel considers to be not a living wage or not equitable, they at times that makes it non-competitive, and at times they come back and they ask for the grantees to increase that ask. How that works within your organization, which has like obviously longer term salaries beyond just the year or two that you would be handling a grant, is really something to be negotiated internally. I would say we have seen with some organizations, they kind of package it as a bonus. So it's not a permanent pay raise, but it's a raise for the duration of the grant that takes you to a livable wage in the detail. Sharon, do you have any that
Yeah,
I think
we've seen this be a point of contention in the past, rarely. Um, my recommendation would be to explain that we understand that these salaries in your grant narrative may be lower than what is livable. It's equitable based on your organization. Or you could challenge your organization somewhat to say, hey, this is a temporary position. We're bringing them in. We know to have a competitive application. They're looking for living wages. We've also seen people say, we'll add a signing bonus or whatever. Sometimes people have to relocate for the job. Maybe you could move that into the moving expenses that they may need to move there and add that adjustment right there for that. And it's also a great way to start conversations with your organizations about living wages for everybody that's working at the organization. So explaining it in the budget narrative is honestly and openly as possible, because the reviewers will catch it. And the reviewers will say they have an understanding of what's going on here. And even though we don't necessarily agree, they have clarified that to us.
One of the other things too, I didn't have a chance to look at the calculator that Tanya shared with you. Are the wages that you're paying what is the standard in your locality? Because that's also that, it's not, it's like medicine. It's not one size fits all. So depending, and if these are the wages for your locality, those are the wages because you also, the example that I gave about calculating the staff time in Haiti, one of the things that they had done is they had way overestimated. They were paying US rates. And you don't want to do that because that causes problems for the people who are not getting that wage. And also, so it could cause all sorts of problems. So if these are the wages for our locality, say that.
Yeah, they look at, the reviewers will look at based on your location regardless. And also maybe the title of that position should equate the experience. So you might want to say, well, what does an archivist get paid in this area? You might want to lift the title to subset that pay wage discrepancy. But great ideas here left and right. This might be a clear question. We strive to hire people full-time whenever possible for one of the positions that would work directly on our proposed CLEAR project. That position can only be full-time with the grant funds. Otherwise, we could only employ them half-time. Thus, we are planning to have them devote 50% of their time to this grant project. Do we only include 50% of their salary plus percentage for fringe in the grant budget? Or do we include the other half of their salary friends not funded by CLEAR as in kind, even though that part of their time will need to be devoted to maintaining other work? You only need to put the 50% you need to reflect the work that they'll be doing with grant funds towards that grant. So if they're only doing 50% of that salary, 50% of their work on a CLEAR grant, then that's what you reflect in the budget. You don't have to put that in for in kind. We're only concerned with the money that's being spent for the actual grant.
Somebody asked if we could suggest a resource to look for equipment to digitize. I'm looking for hours. Our technical director does have, it may be a little out of date, but I'm looking for hours so that I can share it in the chat with you all.
we should also, if you look into our application guidelines, we have some links to some technical guidance guidelines and to a DLF. There's a DLF wiki that has a lot of this information too that we have linked in there. I believe it's called the DLF Special Formats Wiki.
And it's on your apply for an award page.
There we go. Yay, good job, us. I'm also going to take this. Our university has a research department that coordinates our grant applications, contracts, invoicing, etc. They always request a standard percentage contribution of the total project costs as compensation for administrative work. Is that allowed? No. CLEAR's indirect cost policy is that they are disallowed. We do not pay indirect administrative costs on our grants.
There's an indirect cost policy on our page that we can drop in the link to in the chat too, that you can refer back to
That
that.
real quick. Yeah.
And that this might be also connected, this next question to what you just answered, Allison. What type of institutional administrative costs are allowable? For example, if there's a coordinator in our institution who will be contributing to the administrative and financial management part of the project, can we indicate the percentage of their work hours on a monthly basis in the budget? Grant personnel cannot be included on salaries and wages. Most the salaries and wages are reflective of people who are actually doing the work on the project itself. But personnel who are not directly affiliated with the project, but contribute to its overall coordination of implementation, which includes accountants, administrative staff who schedule project meetings or process invoices. Now that you can do, but not actual grant personnel. That would be work that they would already be doing on behalf of the university, and they're not directly connected or hired for this particular project, if that makes sense.
There is an exception for administrative support on collaborative projects. So for collabs, you may have somebody coordinating the various institutions administratively. They do have an allowance for administrative support up to $10,000.
And they should be named collaborative organizations who qualify on your grant.
Yeah. Is that all of them, Sharon?
Yeah, I didn't see.
Hold on, let me see if there's a new question. No, we answered them all. Unbelievable. Okay.
Oh, we have one more. Annette is in Canada, and would they apply at the exchange rate at time of submission?
Apply in US dollars. The grant will be dispersed according to the exchange rate on the day that the money is transferred. I know that's tricky because it means there'll be a couple months till you know exactly how much money you'll have, but that's what we do. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, we got a new one. We have a collaborative project partner who has calculated a cost per item, whereas we calculate our costs by staff hours and other line items. Would we need to break down the cost per item? Should we treat them like a contractor?
Are you applying with them as a co-applicant, or are you the applicant?
They look like they're the organization and the
Organization. I'm guessing they're the lead.
Okay.
Truly, the lead organizations receive all the funds, and they are responsible for the management and the disbursement of those funds. So the key is that the budget detail makes sense to you as the lead org. So whatever apples to apples way is easiest for you all to kind of reconcile that to get to like one number for both. But if they're a collaborator, you wouldn't treat them like a contractor. You could pay them a flat budget line fee for services, similar to how you would a contractor, but we don't necessarily stipulate how you figure out how to make those terms similar enough to come to one full award amount request.
Estimate as appropriately as possible. Is the grant money dispersed up front or on a reimbursement basis over the course of the grant? You will get, if awarded funding, you will receive a check one time at the beginning of your grant, and it's up to you to disperse them as necessary, the funds as necessary.
Yes, we did get a follow-up there, the lead. It's a 50% split of labor. There's no requirement on our end that you represent that the same way. As long as the detail is clear, we can understand where the money's going, and you as the lead organization responsible for dispersing the funds through to the collaborators understand where the money's going. You could have a line that's salary for them, you could have a lump sum line for them. We don't really dictate how you represent that.
If I might suggest to all of the applicants, and it's not necessarily for your application, but for your sanity. I would create what I'm calling a working budget. That's where you have that's what I did, is I have all of my line items, and under my line items, I have what I've paid out of that line item. So I'm essentially treating my budget like a checkbook. So if it comes in, it's a plus. If it goes out, it's a minus. And then you know where you're at in terms of the funds that you've expended, and where that money has gone. So that's just, for in the background, when just for you to keep track once you get your grant funding. I just found out that to be much easier for me to keep my head straight and to know, okay, this is where I can spend money. This is where I have to pull back a little.
It'll also probably make your financial reporting easier, which you'll have to do yearly. So doing it as on an ongoing basis is probably easier than trying to do it all at once for your report.
Oh, and include dates. Treat it just like a checkbook.
So we got a couple more. We jinxed ourselves. Can we include rental space for sorting and digitizing the collection by a professional archive contractor before it is rehoused at our organization? I don't.
Yeah, that's tricky. Rental space, what are you defining as rental space? Is it at your organization? Is it a location that's already at your institution or organization? Is this something that the contractor is doing in their space and they want to charge for the storage of the materials there? We would probably need a little more context on that.
Yeah, if you could email us at hiddencollections@clear.org, some more
Yeah.
specific
Maybe we
details.
could give a more comprehensive answer for that. Thank you. What kind of community engagement and outreach activities are allowed in the budget? And is there a threshold that we should be mindful of? Okay, the guidelines are your friend. Appendix A in the budget will tell you all of the allowable costs and disallowed costs, and they give a great explanation of those. It depends on your actual project, right? What your outreach looks like. For some people, some of the outreach looks like community conversations, programs, to engage the materials that you're nominating, experts in the field. Sometimes there are programs and symposiums. Sometimes they do a film festival. It would all be contingent upon your specific program. As long as you're hitting the core values of our of the Hidden Collections AUV program. Make sure that they're backed up by that. So they look like honorariums. Sometimes they may be travel costs for your guest speakers. Sometimes it looks like, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head of what I've seen in the past. Sometimes it's whatever it takes for you to put on this programming, right? That you're doing for outreach. If you have a specific cost that you're unsure about, once again, email us, tell us what that cost looks like, and we'll tell you if it's disallowed. But I would view the Appendix A of our guidelines.
And we have another question. Do you allow marketing and communications related costs of the project in the budget? I feel like that's a really similar question, just different words. So if you think of marketing and communication as a form of outreach related to the project, yes, we do. And all of what Sharon just said would apply to that as well. And we have a last one. We'll get through this one and then we will pop our last poll. If our employer has offered to disperse payments, do the HR side of things for staff hired, we list this service as an in-kind donation. No, that's more of what we were talking about from the indirect costs. So that's something that we just kind of expect. If we are able to use a scanner already at an institution, do we list this as an in-kind donation? You don't have to list that as an in-kind donation because you're not you're not spending funds, but you can certainly mention in your project plan that you already have this equipment in place so that you can use it in-house.
Yeah, but you could, like, whoever's scanning it, you could add their salaries for the work that they're doing to scan.
Just not the
It's like our panelists said, it was a lot more scanning than I thought. So, okay, we're gonna do a second poll while we get ready. Hold on. Let me get to my slide. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so we have a few reminders before we break. And so let's check in and see how you're feeling about the polls. Where did my polls go? Hold on. Here we go. My polls aren't coming up. Can somebody else launch the poll? My poll's not coming up. It's not letting me do another poll for some reason. It keeps giving me the other one. Louisa, can you launch poll for us? Poll 5B. Thank you. As we see how you guys are feeling now. Okay. All right, looks good. Thank you, Louisa. It looks like the poll's complete. Thank you for your participation and feedback. And as you work on your final application, remember there'll be one more final session, which will be a Q&A session where you just bring all your questions. And that's on April the 17th. And you can sign up for that on our Apply for an Award page.
And we're so glad that you were able to join us today, and we extend a huge thanks to Stephanie and Tanya for leading. As we continue the assessment of our program, we appreciate your continued feedback, and we've shared the survey link for today's webinar, and we look forward to hearing how things went, what you might like to see in future sessions, and how we might improve. Again, please don't hesitate to send questions to the Clear Grants team as they come up between now and the final submission deadline of May 8th. And as needed, our team will also be able to consult Stephanie and Tanya on specific questions related to today's topic. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you next week at our last session.